Final Fantasy is one of the biggest franchises of all time, and for good reason. It basically was the start of turn-based combat and pioneered the JRPG genre. Being around for over 35 years, the franchise is still very popular and has a bright future ahead of it, with the release of Final Fantasy XVI dropping this summer. So for me, I love JRPGs, and I of course love Final Fantasy. So I would say I have a moderate amount of experience of Final Fantasy and only want to grow that experience more. But not only that, you should as well. Before I begin, this video will only be discussing games that are both single player and are part of the mainline installments, or in other words, the numbered titles. So that means I will not be talking about Final Fantasy IX, 14, or Stranger of Paradise. With that being said, here are 4 reasons you should get into the Final Fantasy franchise starting now. For number 1, great entry for those who are new to JRPGs. JRPGs are amazing, but I can understand why it may be daunting to get into them. There is generally a lot of grinding involved, games are prone to starting off slow, and of course, they are generally very lengthy. However, when done right, these aspects are actually what makes a JRPG very good. Open world or not, a lot of side content or not, immersion is possible when there are many ways to make a good game. So what does this mean for Final Fantasy? Well, since Final Fantasy was one of the 2 franchises that pioneered JRPGs, other than Dragon Quest, it of course ticks all the boxes of what makes a JRPG and is designed in a way where experts of the genre or newcomers of the genre can get a good experience. It's not only accessible when it comes to the genre, because... The second reason, you can start wherever you want in the franchise. Well, with one exception that I will talk about later. Many JRPG franchises' games are meant to be a sequel to the predecessor. Nothing wrong with that, of course, but Final Fantasy is special in a way where despite the fact that there are over a dozen single-player installments, they are all their own unique story, and are not connected at all. For example, I started with Final Fantasy VI, then played 4, and then 10. There are 2 things about Final Fantasy that do have connections. 1, mascot characters such as Moogle, Cactuar, Chocobo, etc. are in most of the games, and of course there is Cid, in which each game has its own version of, as a side character who has importance in the plots. The second thing is that some installments have their dedicated sequels, this being Final Fantasy X-2, 13-2, and Lightning Returns. Now I did some research and you could probably play these sequels before the predecessor anyway, but you would probably be doing yourself a disservice. Now because you can, for the most part, start wherever you want in the franchise. The third reason? There is a Final Fantasy game for everyone. We're starting to see something here, right? That's right, I ordered the reasons in a way where they link to the next reason. I mentioned that the different games are generally not interconnected, but that does not only apply to being canon, it's also about setting, gameplay, character personalities, themes used in the plots, art style, and so on. I recommend researching each of the games and get a good idea of which games appeal to you the most. Trust me, it shouldn't take very long. There are plenty of resources to help you. Even Square Enix themselves have answered this question, but let me give you a condensed idea of the differentiation of Final Fantasy games. Do you want a classic 8-bit or 16-bit JRPG with simplified gameplay and art style? 1 through 5 is for you. 6 is also 16-bit. This is where they take the games to another level from a design and a story standpoint. Do you prefer action-based combat and want more real-time action in the game, along with modern, gorgeous graphics? 15, 7 Remake, and soon to be released 16. Do you want to play the games that people feel the most nostalgic about and define the systems that they were initially released on? 7, 8, 9, and 10. Final Fantasy sure seems to have a very diverse catalog going for it. In fact, certain games of the series revolutionized and heavily influenced the game industry. Final Fantasy revolutionized the video game industry and are considered some of gaming's best. Anyone who plays video games has heard of Final Fantasy VII and its characters. Why? Because that game is revolutionary. It shocked the world when it was unveiled during the 5th generation and continues to be one of the most important releases of all time. Decades later, it shocked the world once again with an announcement that it is being unveiled as a remake. Other games in the series that are critically acclaimed are not particularly on the same level as 7, but they are still considered one of the best in JRPGs. 7, 8, 9, 10, 12 all have high ratings from critics and players. The introduction of a job system from Final Fantasy III and V have influenced many modern JRPGs that use a job system. Iconic mascots and characters, which are used for merchandise and artwork. You get the idea. Final Fantasy has a reason for being mainstream, so it is not really in any sense overrated. You may find one of your favorite games of all time on here. Well, I hope this helped you out or convinced you to start getting into the Final Fantasy franchise. Have you been thinking about getting into Final Fantasy? Or have you started already? Tell me what kind of games you've been thinking about playing, and which game you have started if you actually have gone into the Final Fantasy franchise. If you're a veteran, tell me what your favorite Final Fantasy games are. That's all for now, and I can't wait to see you on my next video.